first question is, what are you making of this year's QuakeCon?
Well, I've actually been hustled around through interviews for most of the time that I've been here, so I haven't yet gotten the full walk of everything. But everybody else seems to think that it's going real well.
And it's significantly larger than even last year.
I guess they're talking about double the number of attendees or something. But
yeah, do you think that just how in your mind has Quake 3 sort of changed the whole sort of not just QuakeCon, but the whole idea of what Quake was about?
Well, the entire history of the QuakeCon's always been one of the most gratifying things for me, where it starts out when you just have 100 or so of the people that love the game just driving down to Dallas to go ahead and get together with other people like that, everybody carting their computers around. And in fact, the whole attitude of the LAN party, I guess, is the stuff that the Quake community more or less brought together, and to see it kind of pulled off on this massive scale is, it's pretty interesting, and it's still kind of a weird thing when you think about it. People packing up their computers and traipsing across the country to go plug them into a great big hotel. But it definitely makes me happy to see to see this many people playing and enjoying the games, and even quite some time after the releases of the different ones, and even playing the much older games, but these things that have been important enough to them that they still enjoy them, and they're willing to go all the way out here and sit down and just kind of meet and talk with everybody else, and it's a nice thing.
Now, do you see these things getting even bigger in the future? More events like this, maybe flashier and even more people?
Well, you've got the two different types of events. You've got the ones that are really kind of hardcore competitive, like the CTL events and everything. And I think that those definitely have growth potential, and I think that those may not necessarily be larger in terms of people, but they may become more and more events where people actually really start tracking and following them. While events like QuakeCon are kind of I guess it's more of a fan base thing, like a science fiction or comic book or D&D convention or something. And I don't know how much more they can grow, or even how much they would change, perhaps for the negative, if they became, huge monster events. But it's hard to say.
But on the competitive level, when you have a competition, granted, this is a very impressive competition because you're going to have some of the top players. But do you see the idea of having competitions on games like Quake, or Quake itself, or
Yeah, I think the competitive stuff will definitely be growing. And as we look over the last couple years, when you had the CTL and the PGL and the kind of embryonic things, everybody was looking at it as these may not actually make it right now, but it probably is a sign of things to come, because there's a lot to be said for the kind of competition in the virtual realm on things, because while technology, we're still getting to that point in many ways, but there are the fundamental advantages of you should be able to make a virtual world more exciting than a competition in the real world. There's lots of hurdles to get there, and designs and challenges and everything, but it certainly has the freedom of the fact that you're not constrained by physical reality, and you can do a lot of things that you just wouldn't be able to do in the real world. And certainly, years past when games were just not impressive enough for a typical person to look at, you couldn't pull that off. You're just not going to be able to have, the Super World Finals of the Pong Championship or something, because it's just not something that is exciting enough to people. But with the Quake games, and especially with Quake 3, I think things are impressive enough from a kind of visual and entertaining standpoint that they're pretty fun to watch. To just watch people run around and hear the tension and have hear the audience and the competitors talking about it. And I think there really is a future here. And in fact, I'm pretty impressed that some of the organizations have managed to kind of keep increasing the amount of prize money that's going out and the number of competitors and all that. Where I thought for a long time that Red Annihilation, where I gave away my first Ferrari and everything, I was this is just going to stand for years and years and years as the largest tournament prize or anything going out there, because it wasn't something that was business justified. I couldn't justify this as making sense. It was kind of a lark thing. But then when we look at the recent events having $80,000 worth of prizes and stuff going out, I'm impressed, and if anything, it's probably held together in advance a little bit quicker than I was expecting, because back there you could kind of look at this and say maybe in 5 or 10 years something like this is going to be significant, but they seem to be growing it pretty regularly.
Now, when you start to see rising attention that games are getting, especially this year, more on the console side, but there's more attention every year being given to games. Do you see that sort of those who are champions or those who excel at Quake 3, at Team Fortress, that they'll become more and more present in the public eye, as always?
Well, in our little kind of microcosm, we certainly have our set of celebrities and everything. I mean, everybody knows who Thresh is or who Cornelia is, and the kind of superstars of the little world. The question about how much that's going to leak out into the general public consciousness is open, but I think there will be because it makes wonderful kind of popular interest articles. You know, you can see a lot of the kind of conventional media, they like the idea of picking up on the, you know, the superstar of the cyber warfare and all this stuff. And there's a lot of things a lot of people inside will roll their eyes about and everything, but that is kind of a hook that brings a lot of people into it. And you can look at this thing from the, you know, kind of a fresh perspective there. And there are a lot of things about it that are interesting for people to think about. The idea that you don't have to be, you know, a 6'6" football player or whatever to, you know, to excel at these things. Although the truth to be told, it probably is just as much genetically predispositioned as who's going to be the super champion at Quake as it is in any other endeavor. You know, it's just like normal people, you or I, could practice day in, day out, you know, 24 hours, and just never be as good as some of the people that are out there. I mean, they do have some of the genetic hardwiring that just keeps them better, but it still is kind of one of those things that in the popular mind brings out the, oh, this is a, you know, a sport that anyone could be in the Olympics of, you know, even if it's not quite true.
But, so, I mean, do you see the potential of some of these games being presented in more sort of like a sports broadcast manner, that the technology is there to sort of make the viewer feel a little bit more...
We've seen it, yeah. We've seen a couple of presentations for it. We had a company that came by and had a demo reel of some kind of like an ESPN-type presentation of some gaming stuff, and it was pretty cool. Again, we look at it as like, it may not yet be time for it, but I think somebody could take a stab at it now and not, you know, and not look too foolish. It might work out. It's, you know, it might not. There's still a pretty big gap between like what we do in the kind of hobby world and what's expected to be seen on ESPN. But I've been saying for a long time that I'm going to have this one definite moment of fulfillment when I see an ESPN play of the day in a computer game.
Yes, that sounds good. Now, sort of going back to the past, when you started to develop these games, you know, when you're looking back at things that happened to Doom, and then even like Quake 2, did you anticipate what it would then foster in terms of where multiplayer became so huge that began to overshadow the whole concept of single-player games themselves? You
can usually see where most of the things come from, where if we step back to, like, Doom was our first game that had competitive stuff in there, where it was our first multiplayer game, and we knew that, you know, from the very beginning, the deathmatch competition was the big aspect. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry again, sorry.
So even back in like Doom, our first game that had multiplayer support, I mean, of course, the very first thing that you do, you put in multiplayer stuff, you go, hey guys, let me come shoot you. You know, that's just the first intuitive, obvious thing, and then it's like, hey, I dodged, you didn't shoot me, and then you've got a competition. You know, that is just the most primal aspect of, you put two people in this interactive environment, they're going to do something competitive in almost all cases. And so, yeah, we knew that competition was going to be a big thing, because even before Doom was out, we had the whole situation where internally there was, you know, who's the best player and everything. Romero's kicking everybody's butt on here, or he's pitching a fit when he loses, and that the whole aspects of everything that you could see growing out of all of this would be things that you could trace back kind of to that point. Now, in the early times, before the internet really, and I mean the internet was there, but before it was a popular conception of things, it was basically just you play on the LAN or you play over a modem. There were a few kind of early vestigial dial-up services like the Duango services where you would start seeing, or in fact, Fresh came from that kind of crowd of people. He was a Doom champion before he was a Quake champion and all that. So we had some sense of it, but the way Quake was picked up on the internet, because the whole internet was happening in the popular conception and everything, and here was something that you could actually play with the people all over that you didn't even know. You didn't have to like dial their modem or something on that. That definitely took off more than we were looking at, because we were kind of looking at it as, again, from the Doom model of you could dial another modem, you could play on the LAN, but because almost as a side effect of the fact that we did our development on Unix workstations, our LAN play was TCP/IP, so it just kind of magically worked over the internet. Now, at the first time, like the original Quake test, Q test, you know, the technical details, like the original version of Quake's networking was going over an actual TCP stream, which worked fine on LANs and was very efficient for that. But on the internet, it was like people were like, hey, you can connect to somebody on the other side of the world here, but it was this horrible experience, you know, because of the way TCP works, as soon as like one packet's dropped, it stops until everything else goes through. So you'd be like walking forward and then stop, and you'd walk forward and it's like, hey, I've got a gun, I'm going to turn around, stutter, and like shoot at you. but it was still kind of a magical thing just to be that it worked at all. So of course, between the time that Q-Test was released and the time Quake 1 actually was finally released, the networking layer was rewritten to use UDP, which did work much better over the internet. And of course, since then, with the work through Quake World and then moving that into the other stuff, was stuff that was taken to actually, now that people are playing on the internet, let's try and do some of the things to make it much better. But it's still got its definite issues, and we can look at it and say it's not going to be the truly for everything thing until people have digital connections all throughout, because there are some pretty significant things that you have to put up with on a modem, no matter what the code's doing.
Now, while deathmatching was sort of the standard, that was the beginning of that play, you started to see far more ambitious titles. You have obviously like your role-playing games like EverQuest, and but then you also have games released that are in development like Team Fortress 2, which are very, very sort of intensive with what's going to be happening there. Do you think the technology is at the point to be able to handle such sort of grand detail?
Well, I mean, some of the things, like the fundamental decision about team plays, things that people were doing in Quake 1. I mean, the original Team Fortress was a Quake 1 title, so that's not an issue of technology catching up to it. That's really just a matter of designing the right game for what you want to do. And that becomes a very personal issue on things where I mean, for whatever reasons about being the introverted geek, whatever, I've just never been a team game player. I like my, to jump into the melee deathmatch and everything. But I recognize that probably the team games are the more popular styles of play. And there's good, even, you can look down at the theoretical reasons for it. In a deathmatch game, you've got one winner and a bunch of people who didn't win. In a team game, you've got half the people winning and half the people losing. So you're going to have a lot more people getting the we won feedback and the camaraderie. And it's just one of those things where different people will design different games, and there's equally different valid ways of doing it. But yeah, the team games are certainly the things that inspire the fanatic loyalty, where people do get behind their clan, and it becomes really important to them, rather than just it being your personal honor. You've got the kind of peer pressure to get together and get things worked out, practice more, and all that. So those are really significant, but it's not really a technical issue. Those are social and gameplay issues. And in fact, there's large interesting bodies of work going on that, like the whole EverQuest Ultima Online phenomena. That was something when UO first came out, I was really pulling for this, because it's like, this is the thing that for years everybody in the industry is thinking, it's like, we want these virtual worlds like this. And when it came out, network required and everything, we're like, this might be like a little bit risky, but I'm really pulling for them. I hope that they succeed. And then, of course, with them going on, and then EverQuest has succeeded, beyond my wildest expectations of that. I think that's a really great thing, because that is kind of one of the standard grand dreams of the whole computer game stuff, to be able to plug into the network, go into the virtual world, and see your friends like that. I mean, we were actually, for a time, working on a project that was going to be a kind of Quake 2-based, large-scale action-based world, and for whatever reasons, the project didn't come through, but I still think that's also an interesting direction. But the RPG-based games are better suited to modem technology. Maybe in a few years from now, when you can rely on a game that, okay, we're online only and digital broadband only, then you can start making something where you really have the interactive, hardcore action deathmatch team play experience that's going to be the full deal. Because right now, there really is the awful caste system between the high pings and low pings.
So do you think that once you move to a more scale, like either a wireless or truly digital format, like access from the base standard, that will also release a lot more creativity, or at least creativity put into action?
It makes things a lot easier. I mean, that's really the thing, where there's so much work that goes into making Quake 3 or Half-Life or Unreal Tournament play well over a modem. And even after all that work, it's still not spectacular. It takes a ton of effort, and it's like hardcore low-level network bit twiddling stuff, where a lot of people just don't have the inclination, interest, or skill set to do that. And there's a lot of games that could be wonderful network games when they're concentrating on, say, like, the different ways you communicating amongst your team or something. And when you can just say, well, we'll just transmit all this stuff and it'll magically work, that matters a lot. I mean, because so much of what advancing technology and hardware and everything, it's not a matter of necessarily making something possible for the first time. It's making it practical for a large enough number of developers to do it.
Now, what did you have to encounter when developing Quake 3 Arena to make a game that is rendering on the fly and could actually handle so many different moving people within it, but also make it accessible to a wide enough number of users, where people at the low end were pushed out by those associates.
Well, I think that the biggest part of Quake 3 on there is the fact that the single-player game is basically an analog of the multiplayer game, and that was the kind of primal concept of Quake 3, that previous games had always had this completely different single-player experience, and then you've got a multiplayer experience which has basically different rules. Characters behave different ways. There's different maps usually for it. Well, for Quake 3, the idea was that we'll have the same game, and if you're playing without other people, then the computer is going to be doing the job of the other people there. And the important thing that lets people do is they can start off and they can play on the game and train on it. They can go ahead and build up their skills, have a good time playing against a set of opponents that they get to choose the skill level. Because online, like if somebody wants to get into Quake 2 online play, it's a really hard hurdle to play because they can say, oh, I kind of enjoy this game, I'm going to try this online thing. They'll figure out how to finally get to some servers, they'll jump on, and then they'll have these people that that play 5 hours a day and just they just glance over and casually kill them, and it's to the point where it's not a rewarding experience. I mean, some people make it through that. They're like, I'm not going to take this. I'm going to spend my time practicing, and I'm going to get back at you on that. But it definitely puts off a large number of the people. And one of the things that I looked at on Quake 3, though, is that it should be easy for anyone to jump in, start playing, and it actually takes knocks in the heart, in some parts of the hardcore community, because it doesn't have a whole lot of sophisticated actions. You can't pass ammo to your friend, and a lot of these are team play type things. You don't have necessarily all the means of communications, all the means to direct direct other people, to give them stuff, to be able to do other character action like long jumps or slides and things like this, where it was very much the idea that we want to have a simple game to play, that the complexity of the game comes in your tactics and strategy, not your controls. And again, we come into the fact that there are multiple valid ways of doing games, but my personal preference, I never liked the fighting and wrestling games where it's not so much about what you do, but it's about which things you know how to do, and I don't want our game to have any of that. So it's a simple, very basic interface that you deal with, and then the complexity comes with okay, you can shoot, but then the complexity comes from, all right, well, which pattern of fire do you lay down? How do you predict where the person's going to be? And what pattern are you going to try and run to counter them? And some people don't like that, and that's fine. There's enough people that do like it that we're doing fine with this, and I'm happy to see that some of the people that want more complex games are going to get it from other developers.
It also seems to be consistent with the whole way that things are treated by allowing those codes out there for people to modify the game to their own liking. It's supposed to be sort of an accessible game.
Yeah, part of what I look at on here is, again, because first and foremost, I am a programmer. I'm somebody that likes to go in and see how things are working, modify them, build it up on that. I know there's a lot of people here that are also the same thing, where I look at it in many ways, we're providing a great game. So a good chunk of the people here, they just love the game, they want to play, fight the death match, and beat their friends and all that. But then there's another chunk of the people where what we've provided isn't so much a game, it's a canvas for them to work on. It's something where they can say, maybe I'm an artist, I don't know how to program, but because I can just go in here, I can redo this skin, or I want to build a level, I don't know how to draw, I can't make textures, I can't program, but I can go use the map editor to do this. Or I'm a programmer, I can make wonderful team rules and everything, but I can't make models, I can't make a level. And it's got all of these places where people can kind of shine in their area of talent and take this thing that's a wonderful thing by itself, but then you can go ahead and replace individual pieces of it. And it's then, in the industry in general, making kind of Quake mods is like an industry standard resume, and that's a wonderful thing. And that's a really, really good thing to the industry, because I remember when I was 18 trying to convince EA to let me write a program for something, and you write up something and you say it's no, I don't have anything that you can look at, but I'm a really good programmer, trust me, you just don't have to do that anymore. You can say, look, I did this mod in my spare time on my weekends, and there's 5,000 people playing it, and they love it. So, you hire me, and I'm going to work 12 hours a day, and we're going to make something really spectacular. And that's a great thing, and that happens in all aspects of the content creation. The artists, the designers, the modelers, and the coders.
Now, in your mind, what is your ideal way of playing Quake 3 in terms of, do you like to do it over LAN versus online, and how many people do you like to have?
Well, I don't play the team play games much, which, it's I'm horribly rusty right now, because at the office, everybody's just working on the Team Arena game, which is a team game, which I just generally don't play. But so I like just the jump in, pick up death matches of, you jump into, you've got a reasonable number of maybe 4 to 8 people on there and play through like several level changes, until you get an idea of the sense of who you're playing with, and figure out whether you're going to be able to work your way to the top. But yeah, I've always liked it because I don't have the time to be into the obsessive games. I can look at the people playing EverQuest and everything and say that they did the right thing on that game. They've got these people so hooked and everything, and I can appreciate what they've done in a lot of that and explore the world. But I would never have the time to be able to get into a game like that. So Quake 3 is very much a type of game that I can play and enjoy because I can just jump over. You could start it up, you could play for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can get out of it. And you can have a great time. In fact, the game is so draining that, you're so, hyped up on the adrenaline and nerves that, you play for 15 minutes, and most people, you're like, okay, that's enough of that. I mean, you do have the people that can play for 8 hours straight, but, it's the type of game. Quake 3 is very much a game that I'm very happy to have made. I like it. In fact, just the past couple of days, because I'm thinking, it's like, God, I'm so rusty. I better go practice a little bit. Sit down and play through the single player game. In the first half. It's like, this is a lot of fun. I'm really proud of this game. I enjoy it.
This is more like from a technical standpoint. An engine is always referred to in talking about almost any game. What is sort of your quick way of defining what the engine is when you're talking about a PC game?
Well, it really is a somewhat nebulous distinction on there because, you've got people labeling the different classes of things where you've got toolkits and libraries and middleware, and then you get up to engines. And I think that the important distinction would be that a game engine is something that basically can provide the entire framework that you can then go and modify, while simpler things like toolkits just try and handle specific little pieces of the problem. Now, in game development, there's really only a couple levels of things that have been successful. There's the kind of leaf technologies where you say a sound library, which has this very clear pattern of this is what you put in, this is what you get out, and there've been successful developers that have sold sound libraries and done a good job and been profitable with it. And then there's the full game engine stuff, typified by Quake and Unreal, where you take a game that has been a best-selling game, and then you say, okay, this game is close to what I want to do in my game, we'll modify this into something that we want. Now, the kind of in-between class, the kind of middleware class defined by the Criterion and Argonaut and those types of companies, where they've been there since the Doom days. They've been there forever, but there's never been a significant product that came out of it because they've got this kind of middle ground where they try to take care of a whole bunch of stuff, but they don't take care of enough stuff for it to look like a game, and you still have to do all these other things, and you wind up being more hampered by the limitations or the fact that you have to treat it like a library. So I used to have these arguments with some other game developers about library level reuse versus engine level reuse. And early on, it was a fairly contentious thing where you say okay, at this company we develop all of our technologies. We've got our 2D library, our 3D library, our math library, and we use these libraries among different projects. And I'd be looking at that and saying, okay, but you've mixed and matched the stuff, and not one of your projects really pushes everything. It's not a cutting edge thing, and you're not impressing people. While I would say, Doom didn't reuse anything from Wolfenstein. Quake didn't reuse anything from Doom, so you can say on the surface of it, well, we don't practice code reuse. But then you look at it the other way and you say, well, but Doom spawned Strife and Heretic and Hexen and all of these things, so it's we've got this entire thing being completely reused and replicated on there into these other successful products. And then, with Quake, it was on the same thing and more so, where people were able to take it and make very different titles reusing the large bulk of the technology. And it's been successful, and while it's not a silver bullet that a lot of people look at it as, it's been getting better. There was a problem early on in the early years. We actively tried not to license Wolfenstein and Doom because the situations that we would run into were that people would look at it and they'd say, this is a wonderful game. It can do what I have in my vision. And people, and it still happens somewhat to this day, but it's less of an issue, but people aren't cognizant of how much of it is smoke and mirrors. How much of a good game design is making it look like it's much more powerful than it actually is. And, I had been through it with some developers on that about, well, I want to make this. And I'm like, well, you can't really do that. And they're like, but you did this, which is so close to what I wanted. I'm like, well, that's all it can do. You just can't do this. And, I don't want to have those arguments and debates with people about this stuff. But as the technology has generalized, it is more and more closer to just being able to do whatever they want with it. So it may actually be that on this level of graphics hardware now, that things really are fast enough to do some general purpose things, that maybe the middleware guys actually will have some value to someone at this point. Although I think for most people, they would still rather look at saying, well, we can maybe pay a couple $100,000 more and get a complete game which has gone out and sold tons of copies. We know it's proven, rather than, well, maybe we'll have programmers that can put the stuff necessary on top of this other toolkit to do that.
Now, when you license an engine to another development house, do you have any control over it once it's in their hands? And how does that relationship work?
It's almost completely hands-off, and in fact, that's kind of a cornerstone of our licensing strategy, because there have been things that, like in the way early days of id, we licensed one of our side-scrolling technologies, our own Commander Keen series of stuff, to another developer, and that was before we had any policies on like what you did or didn't get from licensing. And I wound up talking to this guy like almost every day, and in many cases it would get to the point where he'd be like, okay, how will I do this or how will I do that? And in some cases it got to the point where I'm just like, send me the code, I'll go write this for you. It's easier than me explaining everything to you. And we looked at that as, that was a mistake, that like wasted more time than we got in terms of profit from that. So after that we kind of just backed off. It's like, we just don't want to deal with this anymore for a while. But then we had people pursuing us so strongly on the, some of the later titles that we're like, okay, we'll license the stuff, we'll give you everything that we did to make this game. We guarantee that this engine that you're getting does this game, which is a bestseller, and here's all the source data, first all the source code, all the data, so you can just go ahead and put this together and build exactly the game that we've shipped. It's up to you to turn that into anything else that you want, and you basically get no support. And that's not a friendly way of doing things, but this has never been our business model. We're not a technology licensing company, we're a game company. And if people come to us and they're convinced that they want to use this technology that's appropriate for that, we'll do that, but we're not going to hold their hand through a lot of it. And, we've had, we've worked with some companies that are just really good at being able to do a lot of good stuff with, like, Raven and Ritual, or they've got talented programmers that can take what they need and run with it, and they feel that they're getting good value by having the solid base to work from, and use it as something kind of a springboard to go beyond that. And I'm real happy with that. I'm proud of some of the titles that have been produced with that. And of course, the stellar example, of course, is Half-Life, where they've probably done more work to change the stuff than practically anybody else, and they marginalize what came from all that, and I don't gainsay them that. They did a tremendous amount of work, but, I'm happy that it's built on some stuff that, to a large part, Half-Life was possible because they were able to build on this, this kind of baseline technology, and they went, really well above and beyond, and they produced, one of the best-selling games in recent memory, and they did a great job with it. So, I definitely get pride out of just the fact that there's been some help on producing some great titles with that, and I think it is still worthwhile for a lot of the people, but we're not, like some of the other companies do go out and do the dog and pony show about go around and try and sell developers on their engine. And we just don't do that. I mean, maybe we could close some more deals like that, but it's not our primary profit center, and it's just not something that I'm interested in doing, about being a support there. But when people, know what they want, like they've got experience working with the publicly available stuff, we're happy to work with them on like that, and I think some great things have come out of it.
I'm just curious, it's sort of just hit me now. When Half-Life has taken the Quake 2 engine and modified it so severely, well, not severely, but they modified it, does it then become the Half-Life engine, or is it...
That's been a touchy thing.
License that to other people?
They can't sub-license anything that includes our code directly, because, and there were some kind of touchy business issues with that, where there were some things where people wanted to license like the Half-Life based stuff, and they basically would have had to license the technology from us and license the modifications from Valve. Now, some of that's happened, like EA's Alice is using technology licensed from Ritual in addition to technology licensed from us, and that's worked out okay. I think the situation with Valve probably didn't work out as well as as it might have for whatever reasons. But they now have a new contract with us that has modified some of that and explicitly includes some language about that.
All right, now.
if you could talk about your experience at the first QuakeCon and, you know, what that was like and sort of what that meant to you when you saw what your game had created.
Well, the first QuakeCon was, it was just kind of put together by a bunch of people saying it's kind of like, let's all get together down here, and they rented like the best Western conference room, and they had all these problems with not enough power, and things were, everybody couldn't plug their computers in, there wasn't enough place for everybody, the lighting was horrible, everybody walking around tripping over cords. But it was still this kind of wonderful thing just to see these people drove from all over the country to come down here to see this and to just like play with people that they met online. And we had the big thing where, there wasn't enough room indoors to talk, so we wound up just kind of retiring to the parking lot, and I talked for an hour or two to everybody there about, what my technical decisions were, and where I thought things were going, and how things were going on, and it was just really great to just have a bunch of the people together that have had a great time with the product, and half the group's still in there actually playing through the middle of the night, while the other half's talking about like where we can go with this technology and genre, and what this type of thing is going to do in the future, because it's clearly an exciting thing, and it's going to have, it's going to grow into larger things. And to see the fact that the QuakeCon every year have become these bigger and bigger events, it's been interesting to watch, and I feel very good just seeing all these people that have had such a good time, that we've given people good value for what they've given us, that we've done games that people derive all these hours of entertainment from. And like I've had people say, thank you for giving me a hobby that didn't exist 5 years ago, the people that are into the modifications and all that, and that means a lot to me. It's nice to know that we've done a good job.
I mean, do you feel almost like paternal pleasure out of looking at, what you've been able to create for so many people?
There's all the different things that I look at. You can just go out and look at all the people playing, and there is the smile, the warm sense. It's like, this was good. I'm proud of the work that I've done over the last several years with all of this stuff, and it's come to a good conclusion with all this. And then there's also the specific things, like when I see somebody do something really particularly neat, like a neat mod, then I can just be sitting there grinning. It's like, yeah, I was hoping someone would do something like that.
This is with the mind of these many viewers who are emailing in all the time, wanting to know how they can get into the game industry. Do you have any sort of sage words of wisdom to impart to them about what to do?
It's probably easier to break into the game industry nowadays than it ever was before, because it used to be that like the only way you could show your stuff as a lone developer or something was basically to write a game. So the idea is you'd write like a tiny little, like a shareware game, or you try and do something like that. But then it was getting to the point where you look at the big console games, have all these huge teams of people, and it's difficult for any one person to do something that really stands out as a whole and say, this is my game that that showcases my talents. That doesn't look kind of sad and pathetic next to commercial games that have hundreds of man-years in some cases of effort going into them. So it's hard even for people that know how to judge such things. It's sometimes difficult to just kind of get over that hump of, well, this was only done by one person in the part-time and all. But with the ability of the modern kind of community-based games to be able to have people go ahead and say, I'm a programmer, I'm going to do a team play game mod, or I'm a texture artist, I'm going to like make a skin for my clan, or I'm a level designer, I'm going to design a new deathmatch map for this tournament or something, where it allows people that have the skills in the one particular area, the thing that they love to do, it allows them to showcase something in a way that looks competitive with stuff that the full teams of people have done, because they're able to stand on the shoulders of everyone else that has worked on that project and just kind of showcase their talents in one way. And that's so much better than expecting people to kind of in some way be enough of a jack of all trades, with infinite time to be able to do something that stands as a jewel by itself. And you still see that in some cases when people can pick a limited enough focus that they're not competing directly against something that has the manpower piled onto it. But being able to just, again, stand on the shoulders of the giants of everybody that's worked on the stuff before you and be able to say, this is all great and wonderful and I love this, but I'm going to make this part here much better. And if it goes out and you've got thousands of people that like agree, yeah, that guy did a better job than those professional developers that have been working all that time, he's got something. That is the easiest thing to go to a company then and say, look, thousands of people are playing this thing, and I just did this in my spare time. I want to devote my life to, to being the best game developer in whatever field I'm at, and I want to put 4 times as much time in any of this. And that's an easy sell to someone. If they can look at this and say, tons and tons of people love this, this guy probably has the skills to go ahead and be a valuable member of a full-size team, and our next product is going to go out and be more successful because of it.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Oh, one more? Oh, yes. Do you have sort of your own personal tip for playing Quake, or either a style of play that you tend to prefer?
Oh, I mean, I'm an above middle of the road player. At least when I'm in play, and I'm not rusty or anything. It's to the type of point where if you take a group of people, like you walk into any given company, I'm usually better than everybody except their best player. Every company has their hot shot, the guy that that is the hardcore player, and he can usually wipe the floor with me. So I'm far from an expert in terms of all that. And by gameplay, and in fact, even in Quake 3, I'm still pretty much a run around and shoot rockets at people type person, where the much better players are the people that dominate you with lightning gun on the rail, because they're just not my weapons. I'm still kind of the meat and potatoes, catch them on the bounce and feel real good about the explosion there. But I recognize that the people that are better than me do it by having better weapon skills and the more precise weapons.
What is your keyboard config?
Well, for years I used the arrow keys on there. I mean, finally with Quake 3, my configuration, I moved to the WASD on there.
Okay.
And in fact, it's kind of funny thinking back to the very, very early days of Quake. Like when we were first getting online. I mean, back in the early days, people didn't have their keyboards, bound to strafe side to side, at least by default. It was still like the old Doom and Wolfenstein thing: move forward, turn, move backwards. And it's like I can remember playing online in Quake 1 in the really early days, and I was still playing like that with the turn, move, no strafing, and everything. And I went online, and I had, of course, a T1 at the office or whatever, so I'm playing with a much lower ping than everyone else. And these modem people just like wiping the floor with me, and one of the guys, actually started giving me don't play under John Carmack or anything. It started actually giving me these lectures about, it's obvious that you're running right at me like here. You need to change your keyboard configurations and everything.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, John.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.